all care homes by the end of this week, next week, depending on when vaccine arrives this week.
那么各位观众啊，这个技术原因，一个呢，今天我是迟到了；第二个呢，这个搞了老半天，发觉没有传播出去，传播的是空白。我想请大家原谅，今天这个出错很多。不过呢，我会把重要的数据我都记录下来了，我都会报告给大家。那么请大家原谅的就是已经一大半时间过去了，现在就是记者提问的时间。那么我把过去的3天的新增数字再给大家做一个汇报。从周五到周六呢是584新增，周六到周日是新增了445例，周日到周一感谢主301例，总算到了3字头了。3天累计新增1330例，目前为止，现在住院的是343例，其中68例在重症监护。到昨天为止，全省有87346个人接种了第一针的新冠疫苗的。那么他现在还在回答记者有关新冠病毒疫苗的这个施打的情况。他说这个2针之间跟月数没关系，是以周为计算的。那么再过了1个礼拜呢，就是1月底2月初，那有可能开始考虑第一剂的人开始要打第2针了。那么现在呢，主要是看根据供货的情况再调整接下来接种疫苗的第一针和第2针之间的间隔。那么他们说了，就是目的主要是一个是平衡，第二呢是让更多的人先施打第一针。那么他说3月份以后，随着疫苗的货量增加的话呢，会打第一针的会越来越多。那么到第3月份的时候呢，那么就是12月份打的人呢，那对已经间隔3个月了。
So it's a challenge, but
所以对我们来讲呢，这个是困难也是挑战，主要是供货量的问题。那么我们在过去这个周末里边呢，我们也是在积极的联络各个运输渠道各个协调能够希望能够都是按照计划来执行，也是让他们特别是对第一针打过的人的第2针能够实施，2月份就实施，因为35天了。
From Minister Dix on Friday that was maybe half of what was expected, but I realize the numbers may vary from week to week. But as a ballpark estimate, is that 60,000 doses about half what was expected through that period?
It's about half of what was expected in that period. Yes, that's correct. Though we have been told that will be back-end loaded, so in March. At the latest.
所以他也是说到了，就是到3月份的话，我们会慢慢赶上来的。这个主要是辉瑞现在还是主要多，那么莫德纳呢，慢慢供货量会跟上。莫德纳呢，目前为止主要还是供给内陆地区以及北部偏远地区以及广大的偏远农村地区。
Good afternoon. We've had over the weekend an elected official here note that he was traveling in Mexico and is now in quarantine.
那么他也说到了，周末我们联邦有一个部长他辞职了，就是因为度假期间到了墨西哥去。
Orders are just bylaws.
那么他也是说到了，你的这个卫生命令其实是一个白 law 白 law 我也说不好，这到底是哪一种法律
？The premier and obviously the health minister and then the officer of health reconcile other ministers or other ministries that aren't seeming to take the efficacy of these public health orders seriously.
那么他也是说到了，你们的这些禁令、卫生命令是不是对这些部长以及部这里边的这些内阁成员就是我们选举出来的对他们是不是有效特别是我们的省长也是宣布了各种各样的禁令。这样的记者才是真正的西方媒体的记者，应该提这些问题。你这个卫生部 首席医官是有这个权利。所以说，我们的卫生命令是法律有效的命令。那么困难挑战不同的命令。
requiring people not to
因为我们的公卫的命令是不希望每个人能够去旅行，这也是强烈的建议大家不要国际旅行。因为我们的国际旅行的要求就是回来要14天的隔离。这个是法律要求，就是14天的隔离。这个是联邦的检疫命令法律。如果你从这个国外回来，就是要隔离14天，所以我也是强烈的要求大家不要这个除了非必要旅行以外，不要避免旅行了。因为现在是正好在全球流行病的最关键的时候，我们现在已经在隧道的曙光了见到了隧道的尽头是疫苗马上来了，不要再节外生枝这个问题呢，还是要卫生厅厅长来解释一下。
Well, I think, first of all, if people have concerns about elected officials in whatever jurisdiction,
当然了，他说不管是哪个地区都是民选的这些官员
people of Dawson Creek to decide about the overall performance, including all that they do of elected officials in Dawson Creek, just as it would be in all the other communities where these issues have been raised. So,
所以这些都是一个问题。
what I can say is pretty simple.
应该是都一样的
no to non-essential
所以我的家庭，我的答案是很简单的，就是不需要，没有。除非你是必须旅行的，那除了这个以外就不需要再旅行了，不允许。那么现在每一个决定都是正确的，关键重要的，因为现在正好是这个疫情最关键的时候我们的命令，我们的信息是很清晰明了的，每一个人都是这样，不管什么地方都一样的。我相信每一个地方、每一个省份都有一个强烈的指引，包括我们 BC 省也有这样都是这样，不希望有一个非基本的旅行、国际旅行，请大家不要做，现在就开始。
Starting the immunization campaign that we see around the world, and you don't have to look very far
你不用看很久以前，就全球现在开始
with respect to COVID-19 have become highly volatile
现在开始看那个每天新增的人数很高很高，所以我们现在唯一要做的就是遵守我们的卫生命令，这个是太重要了。来阻止病毒的传播。
And the period in the early summer, perhaps.
所以包括到了这个今年的初夏都要是这样有可能是这样也有可能要看到全体免疫的情况如何。所以这个是最重要的，希望大家能够停止一切。
To all aspects of our society and life in BC. So let's dig in and don't do it.
不要做了，不要再做了。
Rob, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Switching tracks a little bit, as it relates to healthcare facilities and long-term care, obviously that's where the bulk of the cases have happened, and then obviously certainly the serious and deaths. My question to either one is, does the ministry have any idea how the virus is getting into these long-term and healthcare facilities, if not through the staff bringing it in? And is there any solution or solutions as far as remedying how how the virus is getting into healthcare and long-term senior housing accommodations?
Yeah, so we know this virus is transmitted through people. And we've known that from the very beginning. The main way it is transmitted is through close contact with somebody who's infected with it. And we know from our work, but also from work around the world, that the single biggest risk factor for an outbreak in a care home is the level of spread and the level of virus circulating in the community. And we know that that's what we see here as well. So yes, it is staff, it is people who are back and forth within the long-term care home who unwittingly bring it in with them, and it is such a challenge. It has to do with all kinds of factors, whether people are minimizing their symptoms, not recognizing them, not being screened adequately in some cases, the challenges that we have with staffing, with access to PPE, with people using their PPE, the challenge with caring for people in long-term care, many of whom have dementia and other illnesses where it's very challenging to maintain your PPE when you're helping people with personal things like bathing and feeding. So it is a combination of factors. And it is absolutely the most challenging thing that we've had to deal with in this pandemic, both here in BC and around the world.
不管是我们 BC 省，就算世界范围都是这样的一个普遍现象。
The issue of community transmission has changed through the pandemic, but since we took measures in the middle of March to limit visits, except for essential visits in that time, and then replace that with the policy in July, essentially the people coming in and out of long-term care are the staff. And so the source of transmission is that we saw that in March, extensively reported on it then. You'll recall the movement of virus from people connected to travel to Washington State, which showed up in our care homes was an indication of that. It's the reason for the single-site order and all of the efforts on PPE and all of the other efforts on infection control. We also seen in more recent months the dramatic increase in transmission in long-term care linked to this season of the year, October, November, December, now January, where there's significantly more COVID-19 in communities, and that's been reflected in the transmission into care homes. But it's a little different in acute care, where there's more movement of, obviously movement of patients in and out and so on, how outbreaks take place, or even in some acute care that is to do with rehabilitation, we've seen the same thing. But the primary source of it in long-term care is, of course, staff, and that's why such extraordinary efforts have been put in place, and why the pressure on staff, on PPE and everything else is so high, and why it's so important that we do the work that we've done. I think in Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal Health, talking about the immunization, but all of our care homes in those two health authorities now have received vaccines.
所以现在呢，疫苗来了之后呢，马上对这个沿岸卫生局和非沙卫生局下的长期护理院建立这个打第一针，也建立这个病毒的防护墙。
It's been a long time since we've had any kind of regular visiting in long-term care.
所以从这个正常访问长期护理院到现在已经很长时间了啊，这个都不正常，这个大家都很痛苦啊。我们已经几个礼拜之前呢，又修改了一些规则，和7月份比呢又不能一样啊，所以大家都很焦虑，我们也是焦虑啊。这个特别是这个职员们，在这个员工在长期护理院的员工，他们也是压力挺大。 所以大家都是希望在长期护理的老人能够稍微再自由一点，能够看到更多的来探亲的人。我们都知道这个病毒在这个哪里，我们也知道问题出在哪里。
Richard Zussman, Global News.
所以我们也是希望那个居民、长期护理院的居民们的生活质量能够提高。
Let's start with one piece of that. You mentioned essential visitors. The senior advocate says that based on the approximations that the province has given, you're forecasting that only about 23% of long-term care residents will have an essential visitor that gets the vaccination. Why is that number so low? And can there be a policy to ensure that every person in long-term care has an essential visitor?
Yeah, so I think we need to understand the visitation that goes on in long-term care, and sadly, and this is data that the seniors representative has put out, it's only about 47% of people, residents in long-term care, have regular visits. And essential visitors has been a challenging thing. There's a process in place to try and
看的探望的人所以47%里才有，那么23%应该是一半了。这个记者只知道一面，大家不知道另外一面这个很清楚，很多老人是孤老他们没有子女去探望，它也是体现了，所以这个也是挑战，因为现在疫苗不够嘛。所以他说我们也会给这些基本探望的人去打，因为现在才23%的人打，就是探望老人的人也要打。
Care homes to be about 8,000 additional people to the 30,000 that are in care.
那么现在呢，还有呢，就是8000这个职员以及3万个在受护理的老人也要打这个疫苗。
Working with the seniors advocate and others that we made the changes to visitor guidelines that we've made a number of times since the beginning of the pandemic. In May, we made some changes that particularly affected acute care and particularly affected people living with disabilities. And we made some changes to clarify the recently. So I just want to be clear to everybody about the term essential visits is defined. And you can provide in the document which is available at the Ministry of Health.
如何定义这个最基本的探访者大家都有定义，大家都可以在我们的卫生局、卫生厅下面的网站上去看。他说我们很知道每个人都希望去探访，大家去看清。
In a certain sense, essential, just as we often get into the discussion with the term of essential.
所以我们对这个基本的探访者的定义也是做了很多的讨论做定义跟社区跟养老院，我们也是了解了各方人的作用。
Of our vaccination campaign effort is to provide, of course, to long-term care workers.
所以我们的疫苗政策现在第一就是给长期护理的居民以及员工打，同时也是给这个最基本的探亲的人去打。
Finish that.
只有这些完成了。
I think we'll have gone some significant way in making long-term care homes safer.
这样的话是能够使得长期护理院能够有一个显著的改观。
Than we've taken right now would have led to more infection in long-term care. That's just a fact, and it's the reason why these extraordinarily difficult decisions, some of the most things I've been most reluctant to be involved in, all of us are, have been made. It's to ensure to the maximum degree possible that we limit transmission of COVID-19 in long-term care because of its impact on people in long-term care. So I think it's fair to say some changes have been made. We're giving focus to those people who have defined essential visits. We also have a process by which people can appeal if they don't agree with the decision about whether a visit is essential. And these are the changes we've made now. And we back that up with adding essential visitors to our immunization program. So all of that is a pretty strong response. And the whole purpose of which is to keep people safe in long-term care, but hopefully earlier than other changes we've made, also to allow more social activity for people in long-term care.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
As we close in on everyone living in long-term care being vaccinated, when will those restrictions start being eased? I think Minister Dix just alluded potentially to having to wait that entire second dose period, which in some cases could be longer than 35 days as we sort of catch up to get to 100%. And once we get to that point, what will visitations look like? Is there a way that loved ones will be able to hold their loved ones in long-term care? How quickly do you believe something like that could happen?
Yeah, we're going to be following the data, looking at what's happening. We know that a number of outbreaks were underway as the immunization started, and it takes another 2 incubation periods before we get through that first phase of the outbreaks in some of the facilities. And then after the second dose, we know that maximal protection is about 7 days after dose 2. So that's what we're aiming for.
如何去最大的防？他说是7天以后，第2针打完7天以后，这个保护率是最大化。那么有些呢，就是说打完针之后呢，在它有效起作用之前，还要避免被病毒暴露。 暴露在病毒当中。所以这个也是我们这个制作的各个计划，让这个大家长期护理院的人更加安全。
Next question is from Marcella Bernardo, News 1130.
Hi, thank you both for taking my questions. I wanted to ask Dr. Henry, because you touched on this a bit about the number of people who've been vaccinated already, but last week you gave us an update on how many people had allergic reactions, and I believe it was at 2, and now we're getting reports that some people have died in Norway after being vaccinated. So
那么这位记者问的就是挪威的问题，这个很好。很多人说这个自媒体报挪威有死了那么多，还是打了疫苗啊？看看是不是
I think Norway is a good example of something that's not unexpected.
这个挪威的这个情况呢是一个很好的例子。他说很多人不期望看到因为这个你又给人家打疫苗，结果又导致人死亡。这个加拿大也会。
We've not had any more reported allergic reactions that I'm aware of. What we have is a process for monitoring of adverse events following immunization, is what we call them, affectionately known as APHIS.
所以我们现在也是在有一个在紧密的监测这些打疫苗的人的，所以有一个系统叫 Adverse Events 我们也有这个系统包括了各种过敏反应都会通过这个系统汇报这个通过打病毒之后之前和之后的症状包括了过敏的这个轻和重包括都会报给联邦。整个联邦都会有这个系统来收集这些信息。
had in place for other immunization programs and are stepping up for this program as it gets more complicated, more
他说这个呢，因为我们也是和其他的疫苗的一个系统一样的做法，所以呢，现在呢可能更加复杂一点。
When we're immunizing large numbers of people,
所以大家要知道，就是当我们对大量的人群做免疫的时候，那么特别是对那些医弱群体那么这些人本身就有体质的问题、医疗的问题，包括心脏病啊、长期病啊等等所以包括癌症啊等等。所以我们还是要很紧密的观测这些现象。
relationship with the immunization they just received.
所以我们也有可能这些是偶发因素引起的死亡等等。所以我们马上也要接获很多的这个疫苗来，所以我们还要更加关注，特别是3月份、4月份以后会大量出现疫苗来了，那么这个问题就会慢慢引起重视。
Share them with them or let them have their own programs? Because I understand some of them are already doing that.
I'm not opposed to anything that helps prevent transmission in care homes, of course not. And we do have some pilot projects. What the pilot projects have shown is what we thought all along. These are very resource intensive, and it's not the cost of the test. It's the time and the medical people that need to be there to monitor the tests and look at how they're being done and how they're being performed on site. So we know that it takes at least 3 people, that it's about 15 minutes per person per day, and you have to you can do multiple sets of them at a time, but they all have to be timed specifically, and you have to make sure you know which one belongs to whom. So it's not a simple thing to do, and it is something that they have been in the pilots been doing once a week, and even that was very challenging. And it cannot take the place of the medical screening questions that have to actively be done when you check in for work, and the screening that needs to be done on all residents twice a day. It cannot take the place of the importance of using all of the infection prevention and control measures that we know work within care homes. So it is a tool that takes a lot of energy and a lot of human resource time, And
所以他说这也是花了大量的人力、物力和时间以及资源、人力资源。
That the resources that we have that are scarce around supporting infection prevention control in long-term care is most often better spent on other measures. But I certainly, if there are resources that private companies have that they want to use for that, it is one tool that can augment the other important measures that continue to need to take place in long-term care as well.
We have time for one more question. For everyone listening, Dr. Henry and Minister Dix will release a statement this afternoon with the latest information on cases, hospitalizations, and outbreaks, which you can find at news.gov.bc.ca. For updated province-wide restrictions, visit gov.bc.ca/COVID restrictions. And for information about the province's new orders and pandemic supports, visit gov.bc.ca/COVID-19. Last question today is from Susie De Silva, CBC.
Thank you very much. Just for an update on what the information you provided last week about the one case of the variant first found in South Africa. Just wondering if you have any more information about where this person might have caught it, if in fact there's another case at least out there that they would have caught it from, or where that may have come from.
Yeah, no, the investigation is ongoing. These things take quite a bit of time. There's always a delay. The whole genome sequencing itself takes a bit of time. So this is a person who was tested on December 23rd. And it's no longer infectious. But yes, we continue to try and understand where, and we continue to monitor.
所以我们现在在持续的关注在学习、在监测也是给大家更新。虽然数据会延迟公布，但是我们会知道，我们现在还不知道这个病，因为南非病毒上次说了，不知道哪里传了，他这个人也没有旅行过。那么现在看来，我们也还有同时呢，也是在观察这个英国变异的病毒的这个情况。哎，又没声音了这个不是我的声音，今天好像故障频出啊。一会儿图像没有，一会儿声音没有。那图像又来了。
Yes, please. And earlier we were talking, you mentioned the strong recommendation, of course, not to travel.
那么又说到了这个旅行，不要强烈建议大家不要旅行。
That you're considering changing the recommendations against non-essential travel to making it public health orders banning it, and given the current set of restrictions are set to expire on the 5th, should people be making plans for family day, and if you could please answer in French as well.
公共卫生命令。
Yeah, we're looking ahead at a whole bunch of things.
他说我们也在考虑很多的因素。
I'm told Super Bowl Sunday, though never been a big thing for me. I'm more of a CFL fan. But
包括了这个礼拜天的这个超级碗等等，大家都要去看当然我不是球迷包括了中国新年等等很多的事情，我们都在考虑。
Lot depends on what happens.
那么都是要根据具体情况具体分析。
Extension of the measures that were put in place.
我们现在是延期了这个禁令。
So we need to look at what's happening, look at where we are with our
我们现在还是要观察我们这个命令所产生的效果。我们也要看到这些新增的病毒、新增的病例是如何发生的。
Right now, of course, it's very concerning in the interior and the north. So we'll be following that carefully and looking at what measures make sense. I have discussions with my colleagues on a regular basis about this, and we have a number of things that we'll be looking at coming up. Hopefully, if we start to continue on this trajectory of decreasing community transmission and increased protection in our care homes, we might have some ability to loosen some of the restrictions. But so much depends on everything that we do now.
然后尽我们最大的努力那么他说的是法语了。好，我再给大家各位网友、各位听众、各位观众，再给大家总结一下过去3天的新增数字。在周五到周六新增了584例，周六到周日是445例，周日到周一301例，3天的总数是1330例。从我个人的记录来看，从进入11月以后，11月以后就是都是400、500，所以目前来讲，这个数字是12月、1月目前为止是最低的。 那么累计的这个总数呢是我没有统计。那么3天是1330例，很遗憾，过去的3天死亡了31例，那平均超过了10例一天。总数咱们 BC 省死于新冠相关的死亡是1078例。那么住院呢是343例，其中68例在重症监护。到昨天为止，本省一共有87346个人接受了新冠病毒疫苗的第一针施打。好，总体的情况呢，感觉还好一点这个，那么刚才伯尼医生也提到了，回答了记者关于为什么现在行之有效的那些禁令，特别是现在还没有禁令，我们是强烈建议避免非必要旅行。这个为什么不作为禁令？那么伯尼医生也说了，我们考虑很多的一系列的事，接下来又有中国新年，接下来又有超级碗等等等等都是具体问题具体分析了。所以呢他没有说这个是禁令但是呢命令只是强烈建议这个 BC 省。但是呢作为联邦来讲 by law 这个是必须的，就是你国际旅行回来14天隔离，强制隔离。那么各位观众今天的 BC 省新冠疫情就给大家实况直播到这儿，我们星期四再会，感谢。